I want to take you all back a couple of years to New Year's Eve 2018, when I was meeting with my friend at a local coffee shop. I'm walking toward the counter to pick up my order, and this woman stops me. She makes a little small talk, but then she gets very still, very focused, locks in on my eyes, and she says, "Do you like to write?" I said, "Yes, I do enjoy writing." But it was a strange kind of out of the blue question. Do you like to write? She then proceeds to tell me that she receives these messages from time to time and that she's come to tell me that I'm supposed to write. Okay. We talk for a few minutes. She tells me she knows it's hard to find the time. It's like she was reading my mind on that one. But she tells me to find a way. So, of course, I'm curious about this woman. I asked if she was a psychic, if this was her life's work, going up to people and telling them what they should be doing. I asked her name. I was really just trying to make sense of this strange encounter. But she wouldn't tell me her name. She didn't tell me what she did for a living. She said, "It's not about me." And she said, "I don't need to know her name. She just gets these messages and has learned to share them when she receives them." Okay. If I didn't already have a desire to write, I would likely have ignored this message from this complete stranger. And we could talk about all the possible reasons this encounter happened. You know, maybe she actually knew me. Maybe we had met at a networking event years ago and she knew that I'd been writing a book. Who knows? But I didn't need to know. Because in that moment, I realized that she reminded me of a book that I had been writing years earlier that I'd put on the shelf because life became busy with other priorities. Her comments were simply reflecting something that I already knew, that I needed to finish that book. A ripple. So within a few days, I revisit my manuscript and I realize the book is actually 90% finished. In the coming weeks, I start to review content, do a little editing, but guess what? Things get busy again and I put it aside. Life goes on. Things are great overall. And then the pandemic hits. And like everyone else, I'm looking for ways to stay active. So I start golfing again after not having golfed much at all in recent years. So now it's July 2020, a Friday morning, and I'm out golfing with my husband. I have a really strong start to my game, and we're about an hour into it. I'm walking toward my ball. I can see it on the right-hand side of the fairway. And in a split second, I hear a quiet but distinct sound. And I'm falling hard to my left. I've just turned my ankle in an unmarked hole on the golf course. After being assessed, it becomes clear that I have a severe sprain and a small fracture in my tibia. It's only the middle of the golf season, and now I'm out for the rest of the year. You know, when something like that happens, it's so natural to think, oh, if I had just stepped 1 inch to the right on this wide open expanse of grass, I would have missed that hole and went about my day. But I stepped in the exact spot to cause a serious sprain and a minor fracture, just enough to take me out of the game. I mean, really, what are the chances? I was golfing, I wasn't skydiving. So I had to ask the question, what was this injury that would have me sitting still for the next few weeks and minimally mobile for the next few months really about? What am I supposed to do with this quiet time? How can this injury serve me? What have I not been paying attention to? And it didn't take long before the answer came. Finish the book. A ripple from within. It had been my soul's desire to finish the book, but I kept overriding that desire with one thing or another. What causes us to do this? To ignore what we know is important to us? Well, so many things, right? But one of them is that we've been trained to listen to our brain and not our whole mind. Let me explore what I mean by that. The brain is part of the mind, But the mind includes more than just the brain. This concept can be a difficult one for many of us who've been taught to think that the mind and the brain are synonymous. The mind includes all the intellectual thought that occurs in our brain, but it also includes a deeper sense of knowing and a deeper sense of understanding that doesn't come from our intellectual mind. This deeper knowing comes more from the body mind. It's not something born out of logic and linear thinking. Sometimes we can call it intuition, but it's deeper than that. And if we define a physical place in the body that it comes from, it would be the torso. There's wisdom in our organs and in our gut, and that wisdom is part of our whole mind. So in effect, we have a brain mind and a body mind, and we need to engage both to make better decisions and to be more intentional about setting priorities. There's a neurobiologist whose name is Michael Gershon, and he wrote a book called The Second Brain. And the title here refers to the gut as being a second brain of sorts. Dr. Gershon explains how similar the nerve cells in the gut are to those in the brain, and that there are actually more neural pathways in the gut than in the entire peripheral nervous system. This points scientifically and physically to the existence of incredible wisdom residing in the gut. And other scientists like Rudolf Steiner have pointed to that similar wisdom residing in our organs. Chinese medicine points to different emotions dwelling, in a sense, in our different organs. I'm willing to bet that that expression, when we say they had the gall to do something, knowing what I know about Chinese medicine and their understanding of anger residing in the liver and the gallbladder, I'm willing to bet that that expression comes from there. I don't know for sure. It's just a guess. But all of this points to the need to acknowledge that our whole mind includes the body mind and our emotions. Intellectual or brain mind thinking is where most of us reside because in Western culture, we're taught to believe that all valuable mind content comes purely from the intellect. If only we'd been taught that the false ego is also connected to the intellect. So what do I mean by the false ego? Let's dig into that one a little bit. The false ego is that part of us that cares what others think. It's the part of us that blames other people, that points the finger and criticizes others. It's the part of us that judges, not only others, but ourselves. You know that voice I'm talking about, right? We all have it. The false ego also doesn't like change. It doesn't like growth. It tends to be very fixed in its beliefs and ideas. We all have one, and it'll always be with us. But we can learn to recognize it and reduce its effect on us. The true self, in contrast, is the you beneath all of that, beneath all the noise, all the roles, the titles, and of course, the false ego. So now that we've examined some ways to recognize the false ego, we can explore how to minimize it. The first and most important thing to remember here is not to let the false ego judge the false ego. In other words, don't be too hard on yourself when you reflect on a situation and recognize that you were acting from the position of your false ego. When we're learning to become more self-aware, it can be a little overwhelming if we don't approach it with the right attitude and the right care. And this is one reason that a lot of people just don't bother. Instead of using the self-awareness as a tool for growth, they fall into the trap of even more self-judgment and feel that positive change just isn't achievable. So when you see your false ego creating an action, a reaction, or a thought that didn't serve you, simply acknowledge it and set about making an adjustment. You might even practice some gratitude for your false ego's involvement, if only as a tool to help you get closer to the ripples coming from your true self. The adjustment may be to revisit the situation or do something different. And if the specific situation can't be revisited, then the adjustment might be just to ask yourself how you'll act differently the next time a similar situation arises from the place of your true self. And once you become clear on that, it'll be more accessible to you for future situations. The key is to start recognizing that false ego with a sense of amused detachment. It's kind of like you'd say to yourself, oh, there's that darn false ego again, but I see it. Next time I will fill in the blank. It's kind of like what happens when you're car shopping. You know, when you're looking at a certain model of car that you never noticed before, and all of a sudden you see it everywhere because it simply wasn't in your conscious mind before, right? But now that you've become aware of it, you see it everywhere. And so it's just similar with self-awareness. The good thing is that the more you practice actually seeing your false ego, the more you can recognize it. And the more you can recognize it, the more chance you have of neutralizing its control over you. And as you do that, watch your true self start to emerge. Ripples from within. Now, you're probably starting to see that the body mind and your true self are more closely aligned with feelings than they are with thoughts. We need to leverage our feelings because they inform our thoughts. We tend to forget about that. We forget about the importance of our feelings. We think it's all about thoughts because we spend so much time thinking, right? But neuroscientists tell us that the vast majority of our thoughts are actually subconscious. Dr. Bruce Lipton says that the unconscious mind operates at 40 billion bits of data per second, 40 billion bits, whereas the conscious mind processes only 40 bits per second. So this means that the subconscious mind is much more powerful than the conscious mind, and it's really running our lives, whether we like it or realize it or not. And I know some of you will say, well, so what, Wendy? I don't want to know what's going on in my subconscious mind. I have a hard enough time dealing with my conscious thoughts. Well, since the subconscious thoughts are running our lives anyway, we might as well get a sense of what some of them are. So how do we become better connected with our feelings? Well, I'm going to say this. It's not easy. It's simple to understand, but it's not easy to do. And that is to allow them. Sit with them. Process them fully, especially the ones that we tend to judge as negative. Notice I said the ones we judge as negative, because if we can let go of the false ego judgment and just allow the feelings, we have more access to the ripples that our conscious mind may not be aware of. Think of it a bit like steering into a skid when you're driving. We know that if you start to skid in your car, it can be helpful to steer into that skid for a moment before trying to come out of it. Allowing the emotions that we don't like to move through us is like steering into a skid. It might be scary, it might be counterintuitive, but generally it leads to a better result. And in this case, it leads to a greater likelihood of connecting with those ripples from within. So as a regular practice, I suggest you build time into your life for stillness, for quiet, to be alone with your thoughts and your feelings, all of your feelings. If you're walking, go for a walk without listening to a podcast or without listening to music. Now, I know some of you are going to catch me around the neighborhood with my ear pods and tell me I should be having quiet time. But we can do both. Just sit for 20 minutes and do nothing. Now, I'm not talking about meditating here. Meditation is an amazing and powerful tool that I practice regularly. But when you meditate, you're generally trying to empty your mind of thoughts. And so that's a complement to this exercise. But in this specific exercise, I'm asking you to sit or walk quietly and actually listen to the thoughts. Don't try to push them away. Listen to what comes up. Connect with your feelings and feel those as they come up. Now, I've been talking about these ripples from within, but if we go back to that story I told you about the woman in the coffee shop, You might be thinking, but wait a minute. In that case, the initial ripple came from outside of me. Did it though? If you think the ripple started from a stranger, okay, if that works for you. But the impulse, the original ripple was there within me all along. She was just reflecting a deep desire I had to finish the book that at that moment in time hadn't made its way up into my conscious mind. Her body mind was simply connecting with my body mind. She listened to the ripple, expressed what she was hearing, and it helped me to connect with my own ripple. And typically, when we think about a ripple effect, we think about how a simple act of kindness can impact those around us. And that's what she did for me. But it's just as important to listen to the ripples from within so you can start to move beneath that false ego, to connect with the true you in your body mind. When you do that, you show up in the world in a different way, a more authentic way that is connected to meaning and to purpose. By living your truth, you give others permission to do the same. They will receive this ripple consciously or unconsciously. Either way, everyone wins when you listen to the ripples from within. To the woman I met in the coffee shop on New Year's Eve in 2018, thank you, whoever you are and wherever you are. Thank you for helping me listen to the ripples from within.